Okay, so again, 30 gauge wire, it is much thicker than 32 and even thicker than 34 and 36. But the thicker the wire, the lower the resistance per meter that you'll have. And I believe this is somewhere in the ballpark of 30 ohms per meter. And I almost always do a 3 wrap one side, 2 wrap the other of this. So when I cut it, I usually cut more kanthal than I need. Okay, so I usually cut about 4 inches, give or take. And the first thing I do, pinch it with my fingernails, run my nails over it to remove the kinks. So it looks pretty good. And then next up, some people heat temper it with a lighter. I prefer doing it with a torch. Does it a little bit faster is probably the only reason. Take it at the end with the kink from my fingernails in it, and just run the torch over the length of the wire. And you really don't need to spend too much time on it. I just go once over and then once back. And you're good to go. Next up, here is my did, and I still have my syringe in the wick. So what I do, loosen your ground screw with the included Allen wrench. Take your wire, add a bend to it. Now place the interior angle of the bend right over the screw. Then with one hand, you secure the shorter length of wire. So you have something to hold on to. Pull it tight and start to lock up your ground screw. And then once done, I double check it because ideally you want the distance from the start of the wire at the ground screw to the wick to be as short as possible. So that looks about good. It's almost directly in front of the wick. And then from there, I just pull my Allen wrench out. And I actually leave my little extra length of wire in there, just in case after I wrap my coil it needs some slight adjustments. But we're going to keep that there for the time being. So, next up you're going to want to check your wick. That's it pushed all the way down. Pull it up. Maybe half a centimeter if that. And we're going to start to wrap. Now, we're going to wrap it counterclockwise so that when we do finally secure it in the positive post, when you tighten it down, you want it to pull more of the wire over the surface area of the wick rather than pulling it away from the wick. Okay, so now that we have our wire secured in the ground screw, I'm going to go over it with my fingernails a couple of times just to further get any kinks out, and then we're ready to go. So what I do is I place one finger on the syringe, and rather than wrapping the wire around the wick, I rotate the device itself, and that helps to get a nice even tautness on the wire. So it's not too loose and it's not too tight. It's just good, firm, and even throughout the entire length of it. So what I do, I'm wrapping counterclockwise, by the way, and begin to rotate it. And the reason why I keep my finger on the syringe is to keep the wick fairly even and upright, so it doesn't get too slanted, so it pulls it into the post, which you don't want. Okay, then once I get to the post, just bring it over, drop it down, adjust it a little, and then keep going. One second, I have to go back, make it a little bit firmer right there. Okay, now we're back at the post. Bring it over, drop it down. Last time. So as you can see, after our third and final wrap, the wire comes almost perfectly to where the small gap between the top and the bottom 3 nuts is. So all you need to do is drop that in, slide it into place. And before pulling it tight, I do a nice quick survey of my coil to make sure that all of my wraps are even, which isn't totally necessary, but I find that every little bit that you can add to it to increase the performance is going to make a difference, no matter how slight. And been doing this for a while, so all my coils look pretty uniform. So, next up, I'm going to tighten it. What do I do? Keeping my thumb on there so it's nice and straight. Going to go back, pull it out so it's nice and tight. Wrap it almost all the way. And then begin to lock down that top nut. Now, I read a lot of stories about people getting hot spots on their top coil, and one of the biggest factors that can result in hot spots is the distance from where the nut meets the wire. Right at that point where it's first locked in, and the wick, you want as much of that coil from when it leaves the wick and is secured into the post. You want that distance to be as short as possible and have as much contact with the wire and the mesh as possible. So that can be achieved either by pushing the wick closer to it to kind of push it towards, or by using a tool like a screwdriver or something of that sort to bend it and to push it in so it wraps tighter around the wick. But what I do is usually after this first wrap, I can see from this angle that there's a little bit more of a gap there than I'd like, so I'm going to loosen it back up, retighten that, and then lock it back in. And that looks much better. Okay, so as you can see that small distance there. There's almost no extra slack in the wire from the wick to the post. It looks pretty perfect. All of the coils are uniform. There are no visible kinks or bends in the wick from an over-tightened coil. It looks pretty good. And then because there's no additional slack that we're going to need to pull out, we should be good to go as far as trimming these loose ends. But one little tip is that at least for the positive end, as there are a lot of issues with hot spots on your top coil, I like to cut it with a little bit of extra space. So as you can see, I have that nice little extra length of wire to work with, and I just bend that down. Just in case I need to undo my top coil, rewrap it, make it a little tighter, a little looser, whatever the case may be, just so I have it there. It's a little bit of wiggle room, if you will, down the line. And one of the ground screw, less important. Very few hot spots I've read or experienced really from the ground screw. Give that a nice little clip. And we're good to go. Then one final test that I do is I attempt to pull the wick in and out. And there's a little bit of slack there with some coil movement, but the wick's not coming out. My top coil might be slightly too tight as is, but it should be good. And the only real way to test it is to fire it up. So that's the basics of coil wrapping. And next up will be slight coil adjustments if you are experiencing hot spots. Alright, so we're back. And now that we have our coil installed and our wick well oxidized, just going to fire it up. I just filled it with a little bit of juice and focus to add a couple extra drops onto the wick. Let's see. And there are no apparent hot spots, and it's lighting up pretty evenly. Let's hit again. Not perfect on that bottom coil, but as it breaks in, should get a little bit better, but that's also because the top coils are the driest, as the juice has to travel the furthest to get there. So you can chalk it up to that, I suppose. But if you are having hot spots, I'm really one to just pull my coil out and rewrap it rather than fiddle, because sometimes coils just aren't worth fiddling with. But some major adjustments that I usually do make to mine is, the first thing, I take my tweezers, put them in my wick hole, and I pinch down right on the top coil where it touches the post to pull the outer wall of the mesh right up to the coil without displacing the mesh in any other areas of the wick. So helps to get rid of any hot spots that you're having right at the top. And if right away you have one very small bright hot spot right when the wire first touches the mesh, like I'm talking right there, it'll be one tiny hot spot that if you're using a 32 or 34 gauge Canthal, you probably won't even see the hot spot. It will just pop your coil. It means that you need to pull your wick out and retorch it because you have a short somewhere along the way. But other little hot spots, most of them you'll be able to isolate down to just areas of the coil where the wire was just too loose on there, and you'll see it'll bubble up, and you just need to loosen your top nut or the bottom wherever the messed up coil is closer, and just rewrap that area, pull it tight again, and you should be good to go. Double check it, and while you're there, if you have your coil undone, you might as well pull it out, give it another go with a torch, and that's pretty much it as far as tinkering. But my biggest tinkering tip is don't be afraid to pull your wick out and give it another burn with a torch. It never hurts to retorch it, and 99.9% of the time, that's going to fix your issue. But that's pretty much it. As you can see, gets a little juice going. Oh, let's refill this tiny bit. Okay, good full tank. And again, this is some pure VG juice. It's Boba's Bounty, and a 400 mesh wick. And some good nice collabs there. And one pointer, if you're having wicking issues, is an old tip from the Katana, which was notorious for wicking problems. Hold your device upside down. See, I don't even need to do it with this. It's going to overwick. But hold it upside down and dry fire it until wick starts, or until juice starts to drip out of your top channel in the wick. And this one is already good to go. It's actually overwicking a tiny bit if I hold it any, if I elevate the angle any more than 90 degrees or level to the ground. But it's smoking pretty good. So that's pretty much it for tinkering. And some other tips there. Fingernails, always another one of your biggest advocates as far as tinkering. I like my little needle nose tweezers for pulling a coil here and there. It's handy to keep the syringe in the wick, because if you kink the wick at any point while tinkering and it pulls it inwards away from the coil, you're going to probably need to rewrap your coil. And that's pretty much it. And again, to reiterate, I do like that extra little length there, just in case I need to loosen it up and pull it tighter. Or even in a quick fix, you can add an extra coil on there. I had my Orion V2.1 with me while I was camping, and it was the only device I brought with me for a 5-day trip, and I did not bring any extra Canthal with me, stupidly, but I was able to, with that extra little length of wire, totally unwrap my wick, or my coil, retorch my wick, reinstall it, and wrap a brand new coil, essentially, with a freshly torched wick and freshly torched wire, and it was good as new. And that's pretty much it for tinkering. So next up, I'm just going to show you the vapor production and give some other general vapor production tips. That's all.